before the Thursday. All right, so the next chapter, chapter 11, is on mining, manufacturing, and tourism. And this is an outline of the organization of the chapter. Where first, it talks about mining and manufacturing in pre-conquest times, then colonial times, then once they became independent republics, and then finally talking about modern day, which is mostly a discussion of the 20th century. And then finally, at the end, it talks about tourism, and they're just focused on modern day. I'm not going to get through all of this today, but I'll get us started. Before the arrival of Europeans, indigenous people in the Americas already had both mining and manufacturing. I'll talk about mining first. They would mine for different types of stone, such as the stones that they would use to build structures like pyramids or canals or temples or apartment buildings and two-story structures and so forth. They would mine for special stones as well, like jade. And here is an example of jade and then what they could make with it. Obsidian would be this black stone here that they could then turn into a sharp object for knives, for their clubs in the case of the Mexica, the Aztecs. And obsidian, according to some sources, is as sharp as modern day medical scalpels. And so, you know, it's easy to underestimate them, but they could be very sharp and very effective. And they also mined for gold. They had, mined for the gold and used the gold. It did not have the value that it was seen as in Europe, but they did see value in it, like lots of other things, and you know, they made things out of it. There's even sort of Native Americans are not generally recognized for this, but in the Americas, and I think this was specifically in a part of North America, there was also the mining of copper and the creating of tools with copper. And it's just something that is typically not, maybe because all groups in the Americas didn't use it. Maybe also because even this group ended up, when we tend to think of progress as linear, but in the case of the parts of the Americas where they would mine and use copper, it seems like they found something better. And so they used to mine the copper and use it and create tools. And then they decided to move on from it to something else. And so they didn't necessarily, it wasn't something that expanded and spread throughout the Americas. Instead, they decided to move on to something else. And then manufacturing. So those are examples of things they would mine for. Then we get to examples of manufacturing. They made clothes. They made textiles, you know, in order to make all those clothes. They made pottery. They made baskets for cooking, for collecting, for storing. And they would make other things too, like canoes or, you know, sandals and so forth. People would specialize in different things, especially in the more hierarchical societies, like the people we know as the Aztecs or the Inca. During colonial times, there was definitely mining then. And historically, we put a lot of focus on gold. And that is because when the Europeans first arrived, that is what they were looking for the most and what they were most excited about. Hence, these ideas of a city of El Dorado or conquistadors having gold fever, just, kind of being desperate and mistreating indigenous people in order to get that gold. But it turns out that actually silver ended up, gold was important and gold was early on, but it was silver that was mined for over 100 years. And it was silver that brought Europeans the most wealth. And it was silver from the Americas that provided a huge percentage of the world's supply of silver. In the 16th century, they provided half of the world's silver. Between the 16th and 19th century, during the colonial period, the Americas provided 100 tons of silver that was sent to Spain instead of being wealth that could have been invested in the Americas. When the high silver ore how to put this? When the high quality ore was running out with a high quantity of silver in it, then they started doing something called amalgamation. Amalgamation is a process where they used mercury to make it possible to extract silver from the ore that had a smaller percentage of silver in it. And so they were able to extract silver from lower quality ore and allowed them to continue to take silver out of the ore they were mining. Mita minera. It is a way in which people were put to work. And during colonial times, it was common for indigenous people to be told that 1/7 of their population had to work in the mines. And so they were told, and I forget the exact radius, but let's say, for example, everyone that lives within 100 miles of the mine, every community needs to provide 1/7 of their population per year to work on the mines. The mining had advantages and disadvantages for the people and the environment in the Americas. Some of the advantages, they would lead to the establishment of large towns and cities. And they would also build some degree of infrastructure, roads and ports to extract, that gold or silver and get it out of the Americas and ship it back to Europe. Some of the cons include the destruction of forests, the poisoning of soils and streams, the massive decline in the Native American population by being concentrated, by being overworked, by being worked to death. And then there's also the unequal social and racial relationships that were established and then perpetuated in these mining contexts. Let's see. So silver mining, we see it in Mexico. And we see it in Peru and we see it in Bolivia. Gold and diamonds, we see a little bit in Honduras, in the Dominican Republic, in Colombia and Brazil. And then manufacturing, we see that in Mexico and Ecuador. And so this is in colonial times. There wasn't all that much manufacturing during colonial times. But the manufacturing that occurred in things they called obrajes, which was kind of the factories of their time. And so obrajes were colonial factories. And just a picture of Native American traditional textiles. And then we touch on modern manufacturing, but yeah, I think I'm going to not go over that today. I'll save that for next class.